While we sleep, the guardians of the night take to the streets, having said goodbye to those they love. Each other knowing they may never say these words again, they face the evil that we run from. They dedicate their lives to those that would hate them because they wear the badge. They wear the badge not for the glory or recognition, but because they were born to honor the thin blue line. This is the LEO First Podcast. We'll talk to the men and women in law enforcement, those that have retired, and anyone who's impacted by law enforcement. We'll peel back the curtain, and you'll get the real stories. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Every law enforcement officer has a story to tell. Get ready to hear from the men and women who put their lives on the line every day for their communities and their country. Welcome to the LEO First Podcast. Now, here's your host, Michael Laidler.
Hey everybody, it's Michael Laidler, your host of the LEO First Podcast, and we are coming back to you for another amazing and exciting episode. Our guest today, she has been a trendsetter. She has been a person that I've actually been following on LinkedIn, which she probably didn't realize. And it was kind of cool when I first saw her information. It was based on a book that she had written called Reimagining Blue. And when I looked at it, just the image alone really helped me visualize how when we look at law enforcement officers, police officers, sheriff's deputies, correctional officers, border patrol agents, FBI agents, is that they're more than just what you see in the uniform. They're businessmen, they're businesswomen, they're pastors, there's mothers, daughters, fathers, brothers. And just looking at the perception that she was bringing, especially from having 30 years of law enforcement, was just amazing. So when I had the opportunity to reach out to her, I did. And I will tell you guys, because, you know, I try to be fully transparent. I forgot that I reached out to her. And then we end up finding ourselves in a mutual group. And I was like, oh, I meant to get her on the podcast last year in 2023. So as soon as I saw the group that we were in, which was Impact 11, which is a community for speakers and people that are really trying to take that to the next level, I was like, you know what? Let me reach out to her again. And coincidentally, this was even better timing. Fate allowed us to get to where we're at. And that's what we're going to be and who we're going to be talking to today. So my guest today is Kristen Ziman. As I told you guys, she is an author. She is a speaker. She is a law enforcement veteran with a legit 3 decades in, 27 years with Aurora, ending at a chief of police, and then another 3 years as a cadet. And I want to make sure, hold on. I want to make sure I didn't mess this up. Oh, yeah, it is Aurora. Oh, I thought she had left the agency and went somewhere else before she got chief. So yeah, she spent all her time there, which is really cool. And like I said, guys, she is a speaker that I have seen really thriving. And it's always cool when you see fellow law enforcement officers, people expanding their career, especially into a passion that they have. So you guys have heard a lot from me. Now I'm going to turn it over to the floor. Kristen, tell us about you. Tell us what you want our viewers to know today.
Hey, Michael, thank you so much. I'm elated to be here, and I'm so glad the universe brought us back together. Thanks to social media. Man, it's like, you know, it can sometimes be a dumpster fire, social media, but I have also found the best relationships that I have made and the best networking and connections are also from social media. So that tells us that, you know, in life, there are things that are both good and bad, right? So yeah, I've just retired actually a few years ago. I said just because it feels like just, but I wanted to be a cop since I was a zygote, and I started at the tender age of 18 years old in my police department. It was my hometown, right? And graduated from high school and started as a police cadet and became a sworn officer. And if you would have asked me at that time in 1991, that if you would have told me that I was going to become the chief of that organization, I would have laughed at you because it just seemed absolutely improbable. There were actually no females in rank when I joined, which is crazy because it's a mid-sized agency, over 300 officers. So I became the chief of my organization in 2016. And I'll just start there just because that's where it gets interesting. The first couple of years of my tenure was amazing. I got to put a great command staff together of progressive-minded men who are just remarkable, my truth tellers. And then the unthinkable happened after a few years. On February 15th, 2019, we had a mass shooting in my city. 5 officers got shot, 5 people were killed. And just when we started healing from the physical wounds, please note that I did not say emotional wounds because those are still ongoing. But once we started healing from that, then a little thing happened called a pandemic. Maybe you heard of it.
I did, briefly.
Briefly, yeah. So trying to figure out how to lead during a pandemic, a thing that I'd never lived through before. And then once we started to get the handle on that and, figure out all the, CDC rules and, sending police officers into what at that point, we knew was going to be dangerous and putting them in harm's way and their families. Then we started to get the handle on that. And then a little incident happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that sent civil unrest across the nation, including my city. And my city was burned, squad cars set on fire. We had protests and riots. And it was 3 years of truly being tested, being a punching bag. And a good leader never leaves in the middle of a crisis. So I waited for the dust to settle and then I got the hell out of there. So fast forward, I retired at the end of 2021 after 30 years in my department. And I sat down trying to reconcile my profession because at the beginning of my profession was Rodney King. And at the end of my profession was George Floyd. And when you look at those two bookends, man, this is, why we got so much slack in the media. And if you looked at that, you would think that law enforcement didn't get better. And yet I saw it get better with my own eyes. I saw us get more professional. I saw us get more community oriented. I saw us being held more accountable. And so I was grappling and, I sat down after I retired and I just needed quiet to kind of reconcile this career that I had dedicated 30 years to. And I cracked my heart open and I wrote a book and I just purged my soul and my thoughts about my profession, the good and the bad and the ugly. And, that led into speaking. I've been going around for the last several years now speaking about leadership, culture, optimism. And I'm also a subject matter expert on mass violence. And I'm on the DOJ team that did the Uvalde review. So that's keeping me busy in my post-law enforcement life. So I will stop right there and just see what you can pull from that, because that's a lot.
And I'm sure the viewers are now intrigued, and 30 years of law enforcement experience, and just thinking, like you said, the bookends, like your career started with Rodney King, so to speak. Obviously, you weren't in California, you were in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And then it ended with George Floyd, so to speak, out of Minnesota. And there's so much that happens in everybody's lives. And sometimes when we're going through that whole rat race of trying to make things work and develop ourselves and be the good leaders, build cultures, establish family ties, a lot of those things get put on the back burner. But before I jump into the family side, one thing you said early on, and I wrote it down on my notes, which obviously you can't see because I typed it on my MacBook, was you talked about being a woman in leadership. And I know throughout the country, one of the initiatives right now is establishing more women in law enforcement. And I know one of those things are called 30 by 30 initiatives, because I've seen it. I've been to a Willie conference before. I actually spoke at one 2 years ago. And I'm seeing a lot of amazing strides. And for people that don't know what it is to have 30% of women in law enforcement by 2030, like as a whole, not just one city, not just one agency, not one state, but nationwide. How has some of the leadership experience you've had in and outside of law enforcement shaped your viewpoint on like this initiative to bring more women into the industry?
Yeah, sure. And it's kind of going back to what I said originally, when you can't see yourself in a position, when there's no line of sight to it, no visibility, then you don't think something is possible for yourself. And that's why I said I would have been shocked if you would have told me I'd become the chief of my department, because there was no women in rank. So that visibility matters. I do want to say something about the 30 by 30 initiative, because there's also a little bit of pushback of that, especially after or the Secret Service, and the recent assassination attempt where there've been a lot of flack on, female Secret Service officers. And, the point there is that is not to bring people up just to check a box, but to bring competent people who may have never been invited to the table, right? And that doesn't mean that you lower standards. So there's a big distinction there, is that it's giving people opportunities. And I can use a personal example of that. My chief before me, no, let me back up. 30 years in my department, and every time a chief was appointed, we knew who that chief was going to promote, because you promote in your own image, in diversity of thought. And, it was just a lot of white men promoting other white men. And that was just traditionally the way it was. And the chief who I succeeded actually broke the mold on that. And he said, I'm going to bring, diversity of thought. I want to be surrounded by people that think so differently than me and challenge me. And he was the chief that taught me that. And of course, he didn't, he didn't, he looked at competency above all, but he was giving other people opportunities instead of picking, his quote friends or cronies. And so it's very important that we make that distinction, is that 30 by 30 initiative is just allowing other people to come to the table, and it's not settling for less. And when we bring more diversity of thought and, a different way of doing things, we're better as a whole, we're better as a profession.
And it's crazy when because some people, even I'm a black male. Well, I'm actually multicultural. Like, I have black, white, Hispanic in me. Grew up in Miami, grew up in an area where there was a lot of diversity. And one of the things that I grew up to hearing a lot as a black man was, I can't even think of the name of it. It literally slipped my mind. When colleges are looking to diversify, what is that called?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I completely forgot what it's called. Well, needless to say, a lot of people were not happy, because they're like, well, you should just earn your way into certain places. But what people don't realize, and I think it's usually people that are already in the places that say that, is sometimes stepping outside the box and bringing in new opinions is tougher than what we've seen. And things like the 30 by 30 initiative, in my opinion, is good, because it's putting a pressure, at least, to say, hey, we have other ideas out here. We have other theories, because if not, people, just our species, we're usually going to bring in people that look like us,
That's right,
think like us, behave like us. And it's not just easy. And that could be anything. That could be women, for example. Whatever perspective you're looking at, you're usually going to bring in someone that's more similar to you than someone that's going to just naturally establish conflict with your thoughts. So in an industry like law enforcement, which has been heavily dominated by white males, it's not surprising that there's not a big number of women or diversity. And it's not because I don't think people are just wrong. I just think it's hard to for somebody to work outside of their natural, like their nature. So, what I mean, Kristen, and like I said, you've seen it. So, and I'm sure, like you said, being a woman, especially in a leadership role, I'm sure you've been questioned a multitude of times on that. Like, when you see, and obviously you feel it, you feel the pushback. How do you handle it? And I want you, because I think it's important, because I know there's women that are watching this and people that are not white men that are watching this. How do you handle that pushback, like emotionally? Like, how do you get through that? Because obviously you have a thick skin, you have to as a chief, but how do you truly dial back when you feel that pressure coming towards you that is unwarranted and only based on your gender and race?
Yeah, for sure. Well, a couple of things I just want to touch on there. And, I don't want to give, especially male whites, a bad rap, because, man, I'm telling you, they were some of the best mentors, where there were no females in my department of rank. And so my mentors, which I call the gatekeepers, the ones that said, hey, we want to bring you to the table, were all, male whites. And so that is such a responsibility. And there's amazing men out there that bring people forward. So I just want to make sure that I underscore that. But yeah, the answer to your question is, I got a lot of pushback. And what's interesting is, this is where stereotypes and templates are alive and well. I am a very small stature. I'm 5'4", 125 pounds. And people looked at me and asked the question throughout my entire career, do they let you drive that squad car by yourself? And, and I just laughed, and I always come up with some retort like, I could kill you in 11 different ways if I wanted to. So I found humor as a way to navigate. But then as I moved up the ranks and it became, a little more serious where people were, questioning, my capability, it didn't so much happen in my department because I came up in my organization. So I like to think that I earned the respect of my comrades as I moved up, but it felt more but from the outside that I was getting the pressure, but I did feel it. And the way that I handled that is I learned to use criticism as fuel, because when you learn to use criticism as fuel, you will never run out of energy. And there's that little voice inside your head. And we have mentors and we have tormentors. And I have had a lot of tormentors in my career. And I have used those tormentors as a means to tap into that reservoir of strength. And so I thank them because they are the ones who built my resilience and my tenacity and my grit. And because of that, I wanted to prove them wrong, that I was capable and competent and skilled, and in both performance and leadership. And so I just use that as a challenge.
And I had to write that down. So if anybody's watching the video version of this and they see the screen shaking a little bit, it's me typing on my laptop. But gosh, I never thought of that phrase, mentors and then tormentors. Like that, it's such a great play on words because it's true. A lot of our, I want to say, skill and our resiliency comes from when people are pushing back. And regardless if they're right or wrong, just the fact that you have that pushback makes you think about things a little differently. And it kind of tunes your mind like, am I doing this right or am I doing it wrong? Or are they just being an a-hole? Like where is it coming from? But yeah. I love the fact that you take those opportunities, and I do call them that, to figure out how to get better. Because just because your mentors or other people aren't saying anything doesn't always mean the tormentors are wrong. It's just they have the fortitude to actually bring it up. And who knows if they're always bringing it up for good or like the right reasons, but they're at least bringing it up because they want to highlight something you're doing wrong in order to probably serve whatever perception they are trying to create of you.
Yeah, but let's unpack that, right? Because both, I think, can take us to the better outcome. But here's the difference. Here's a distinct difference. Your mentors are the people who are hard on you. They offer you criticism, but it comes from a place of sincere caring and wanting you to get better. And it's the mentors that are hard on us. Those are the ones that I remember the most because they care. The tormentors deliver the same kind of criticism, but they also try to throw roadblocks. They don't want to make you better. They just want to point out everything that is wrong, and they don't want to help you succeed. So there's two very distinct differences, but both of them can take you to the same outcome. With that criticism, you can come back, even more resilient and stronger than you were before.
And I could tell just based on your passion and just your knowledge, obviously you've used both sides to help you get to this great place that you're at today. And it's allowed you to go on stages. It's allowed you to write books. It's allowed you to get in different organizations that help you disrupt some of the things that they may have going on. Yes, I read some of your profile. That's where I got that word from too. I told you, I think of things in my head. So guys, she's a disruptor too, just that you know, in a good way. Like, cause let's disrupt the bad cultures that we have and some of the things that we're doing. But Kristen, I love how you've taken both of those groups and used them to your advantage, because all of us, every single one of us, I don't care who you are, you have both groups. And realizing that at least the mentors are doing it from the right place, that you know that people are out there trying to promote you and help you succeed. So it's good to understand you have both, but rely on the mentors, don't rely on the tormentors, because if you rely on the tormentors, then you're just going to find yourself always stressed out, because no matter what you do, you're probably never going to satisfy whatever perception they have. But your mentors who are there for you, they're going to be the ones that want to get you to that next level. So Kristen, like I always tell people, I try to keep it within the time frame. If people are looking to book you for an event, they're looking for your book, they're just trying to keep in contact with you, what are some ways they can do that?
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to my website. It's simply KristenZiman.com, and that has all the topics that I speak about. Also, you can grab my book from there. Buy my book. You don't have to read it.
Hey, guys, if you buy the book, please leave a review. She has 117 right now. Let's try to get her to
Well, look
200
at you
reviews.
doing
Yes,
your
hey, I
homework.
try to
I
do all my
love
research.
it.
Hey, I'm not great. I always tell people I'm not the best, but I can at least try. But at least my heart's always in it. I can tell you that.
I
But no,
love it.
seriously, guys, make sure you reach out to her. Like I said, Kristen, like I said, I saw her through LinkedIn, and some of the things I saw her doing, I was so impressed with. I was like, you know what? It's so amazing to see any law enforcement officer strive, but knowing some of the things that I believe she went through in her career, especially over the last 30 years, I was like, I know it's not easy. And stepping outside of what is perceived in law enforcement as different, and that's being a woman speaking and stuff like that, it's tough, whether you know it or not. And going back to, I know I'm gonna touch on it just for a second. I don't want any white male that watches this to think I have any issues with you guys. Remember, I'm a quarter white, but a lot of my guests are white males, and
Mhm.
it's just the industry is what it is. But
Mhm.
to get a new perspective or another perspective, it's good to have people from different areas. Like, I mean, even different religions, because you just don't know what's going to benefit you. So a lot of my guests just tend to be just good people. Doesn't matter their skin
That's
color,
right.
doesn't matter their gender. I don't care the political beliefs because I'm not into politics like that. I don't care what agency they work for. If they're good people in a uniform, that's who I'm looking for. It just tends to be statistically based on what the industry is. But Kristen, when you're thinking about your audience, you're thinking about everything you have done. What are some final words you can shed to allow people on just to help them move forward?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think first of all, is we've gone through a pretty challenging time in law enforcement. And, after the murder of George Floyd, it was as if someone flipped a switch in the nation on our profession. And, as chief at the time, I saw people leave, come into my office and say, I can't take this anymore. And, we went from, gosh, we had 5 officers shot in the middle of this mass shooting, and so we went from hero to zero. And it was a tough time for law enforcement. And I think the pendulum is shifting. And I think what I want to say is when I cracked my soul open and wrote that book and I was struggling with my profession, what I came to, the final conclusion is that, man, we cannot all be painted with that broad brush. And it would be a shame if people who thought, man, I'd love to go into law enforcement or want to stay in law enforcement, if they left because of just this I call it this valley in our profession, and this one time frame. We've seen peaks and valleys of law enforcement throughout the years, and I think what I want people to know is that the pendulum is shifting back, and we've got to continue to recruit great officers, and we need those who are in our profession to stay strong. And even though it feels sometimes like you're forever pushing that boulder up the hill, you're out there doing amazing work. And, it's 1% better. You're making our profession better every day, and to keep fighting the good fight, because, man, we've seen what happens when we turn our back on law enforcement, and it's not a pretty sight. Democracy needs law enforcement as the gatekeepers of our society, the peacekeepers, the guardians. And so just keep doing what you're doing and keep fighting that good fight.
So as we were talking, as I always tell you, my brain goes through a lot of stuff, Kristen. And I, I was thinking about, once again, George Floyd and how we are as an industry today. And I completely agree with you. It's tough to, I felt the same way in 2021. Like, I literally felt like someone literally just turned the switch off on us. And it said, whoever is in it, you just have a bad image. And I think in 2024 we are fighting our way out of that more successfully
We are.
now. And there's been some events like what happened in Illinois last month with Sonia Massey, where I believe if the
Oh,
perception was still as bad as it was 3 years ago, that would have turned into another situation that was very explosive. And
yeah.
from my readings, from my just I don't look at the news all the time. I don't remember seeing anybody riot. I don't remember seeing anybody protest. People saw what happened on video, although it was a white male and a black female. Nobody came out and said it was a race issue. They're all looking at his decision as a
That's
person.
right.
So I think that was kind of a good shift for us in law enforcement, because I think if that would have happened in 2022 or even
Agreed.
maybe early 23, we would have found ourselves still talking about that so extensively that it would have been really bad for the environment. So I
Yeah, you're so right about that. I hadn't thought about that. And, back then that was the perfect storm, with COVID and everything that was happening in a divisive country, even more divisive than it is now. And I do want to pinpoint something there. You saw that sheriff come out and say, this, I mean, he
knew.
didn't waste any time. He came out and said, this is deplorable. This is not who we are, and that transparency, and that sheriff fell on the sword. And that's a really hard thing to do, but there's just no way that you can back that deputy. Of course, you saw it with your own eyes, what happened there, and horribly trained. And so that's another part of leadership, for those leaders out there, is sometimes you're going to have to stand at that podium and that microphone, and you are going to, have to eat that shit sandwich. Sorry if I cursed.
It's fine. I put on my when I post I tell people it's not gonna be a clean episode, so they understand. Plus, if you're in law enforcement, you haven't heard a curse word. Hey, whatever agency you're working at, whatever community you're working at, you are literally at the 0.000% percentage if they don't curse. So
that's right.
Trust me. Some viewers may have even smiled themselves when I heard you. Now, it's cool because what I love about my podcast is some things that happen on it. I think a lot of it's destiny and fate. So I started my podcast in 2019, and then I just kind of got burned out. So around mid 2020, I kind of stopped doing it. But one of the final episodes I did, because as you were talking, I started thinking about it even more. I actually made a podcast, which is episode 10, called Where Did They Go? And it was based on the scenario that happened in Aurora PD.
Now, keep in mind, I'm Aurora, Illinois. So there's two Aurora, Colorado, and Aurora, Illinois both had mass shootings. So I'm Illinois. It happens all the time, and especially because we both it happens all the time.
I had this whole time I thought you were Colorado, and I was like, when am I going to Colorado again? I just got from Illinois last week. But
I'm a Midwestern girl.
Well then, we'll scratch that whole part out. We're not going to delete that off the podcast. It was me getting excited. I saw Aurora PD because I actually went back to episode 10, and I was like, oh, it was Aurora. But I see what you're saying, two different cities. But yes, because they had something happen, and that might have been more 2020 that they had something that was questionable.
Oh, for sure. That was the family that they had sprawled out. Yes, there was a lot that happened in Aurora, Colorado. Yes, and that made headlines
one of my most viewed episodes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, and once again, more malfeasance by police officers that show the worst of us, but that is not the majority of us. And, and that's what the nation, I believe, has come to see, to your point, is that we have to look at the human and not paint the entire profession with a broad brush.
Right. And that happened shortly after the George Floyd incident.
That's right.
But so that was within that storm that was still all the way at the top. So that makes more sense. But that threw me out because I was excited. I thought that's what it was. But guys, I know you guys enjoyed this episode. I know you all have had the opportunity to hear another side of Kristen. And I know you guys can tell that we could talk for hours, but for the sake of viewership, we're not going to do that. But I do, as I build this platform, and you guys know, especially if you follow me on Instagram, that I'm really trying to push the show a lot there. So one of the things that I'm starting to do in the future is through Instagram, start doing these shows live. So what I'll do, Kristen, and I'm sure you'll be excited because I think you can talk off the cuff very well, is do another episode with you, but rather than just do it on Zoom, we're going to actually have Instagram live going as well. And then that'll give our viewers the opportunity to connect with us as well. So that is something a little different. I don't see a lot of podcast hosts doing that because they want to edit and cut things out. I don't. I want to be real and as raw as I can be to show people that we're real. So this episode has been great. I hope that you all have enjoyed your time listening to her. Make sure you follow her on LinkedIn. Make sure you follow her on IG. Make sure you go get a copy of her book. I hope you read it, but if you don't, at least leave a review saying you read it, just in case. Hey, love it. We can accept that. I'm an author too. Sometimes I say, "Hey, did you read my book?" And I get that deer in the headlights look. I'm like, "Hey, just read it. Just leave me a rating so I feel good about myself."
Love it.
Yeah, trust me, I have a thick skin. If you say the book was good, hey, I'm not going to ask you a question on chapter 6. Trust me, it's not me. So make sure you guys reach out to her because I think she will be a breath of fresh air for any place she's at because of her knowledge and her tenacity and her willingness just to keep pushing. Because she could be on a lake right now, not doing anything. She lives in Florida now. She could be looking at the golf and not doing anything with law enforcement, but she's choosing to stay in this for all of us. So guys, make sure you support her. Make sure if you're looking for that speaker, I think she would be the right person. But if anything, guys, make sure you guys be safe out there. Y'all have a great day. If you need anything, reach out to us and enjoy.
You've been listening to the LEO First Podcast. Michael has been in law enforcement since 2005. He's worked for 3 law enforcement agencies in 3 different states. He's a professional speaker who travels the country teaching about leadership development and self-awareness. And he's the author of a book called Greatness Beyond the Badge: The 3 Key Principles for Self-Awareness. It's Michael's passion to bring law enforcement members' stories to the front, so you get the real and raw take. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with Michael on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Michael Laidler, on Twitter at Michael A. Laidler, on Facebook at Michael Laidler Leadership. Send an email to michael@michaellaidler.com and hit the website at michaellaidler.com. See you next time on the LEO First Podcast.
Like that, I'm going to be leaving it now. Find vehicle, advising and remote.